Welcome along to one of our Data Science Festival sandbox sessions. I was just chatting beforehand, actually. I have no idea where the time has gone today. We have very rapidly got to this session, and it's been one that I've had circled in my calendar for a few weeks now. As you can see, it's in partnership with our good friends at BSI. BSI have been amazing sponsors and partners of the Data Science Festival for the last couple of years. We're very, very grateful for the support. And it's coming towards actually our Oktoberfest event. We are moving into October, so the team are working very hard behind the scenes on Data Science Festival Oktoberfest. I'm aware many of you will be joining us from across Europe, across the world, but if you are in the UK and you are free on October the 19th, it is worth checking out the Data Science Festival Oktoberfest conference. Tickets are allocated, they're free, they're allocated by a ballot. I think we've maybe got about a week left of people being able to enter that and tickets being given out. So there is still time if you are interested. In terms of today's session, we're talking about from code to compliance, an overview of AI regulation for data practitioners. I'm sure, as we're well aware, this is becoming more and more something that we should all be aware of, and BSI are absolutely the leaders in the field when it comes to this sort of stuff. So really looking forward to the session. If it's okay, I'll maybe ask Alex and Pooja to come and join me on stage. So we have Alex Shepherd and Pooja Kumari from BSI. Alex is an AI client manager focused in regulatory services, and Pooja is an AI technical specialist. So yeah, how are you both doing today? How are you doing, Pooja? I'll come to you first. Have you had a good morning?
Hi, David. Yeah, I had a good morning, and I was working on my reviews. Then I was preparing for this session. So I hope everything goes well today.
I love it. I love it. I feel like we're in
And
safe
our audience
hands.
can enjoy the session as well.
Absolutely. I'm sure we will. I'm sure we will. I really appreciate you doing that prep work for us, Pooja. And yourself, Alex, how are you doing today?
Yeah, doing really well. Thanks, David. Really
Amazing
looking
stuff.
forward today to show you guys this content.
Lovely. As I say, I feel like we're in safe hands, so that's amazing stuff. So I'll maybe get you to share your screen, Alex, if that's okay. Just as Alex is doing that, I will call out it's an interactive session. So first of all, we have the Q&A feature. If Alex and Pooja, as they're going through their session, if you have specific questions, please do put it into the Q&A. Just makes it a little bit easier to go through them all at the end. The chat is also open, so if you want to jump in and say hello, you have the option of either putting a message to everyone or putting a message just to the host and panelists. It's always nice to say, hey, I'm here, I'm joining from wherever you are in the world. Let us know where you are out there, and we'll give you a little shout out as we go through the session as well. So in terms of the slides, looking good, Alex. So if you're both happy, I'll maybe hand over to you and come back at the end for the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Really great to see so many people come along for this webinar to talk about code to compliance, right? So which is basically talk about a really important topic to my heart, which is about we have our AI regulation in place. Now, how can we apply this in the kind of AI practitioner perspective? So I'm really looking forward to sharing this with you along with Pooja here as well, to give you some insights into this field and hopefully give you some guidance as we go through. So without further ado, what we'll do is we'll move on to the next slide. There we go. So what we're going to talk about today is the following. So we're going to talk about AI legislation, and the central question that we're going to ask is about why should we even bother about AI legislation, right? Hopefully, once we've kind of convinced you of that, we're going to move on to the EU AI Act and how it's broken down. So I'll give you an overview of the risk classification part of the EU AI Act, and then Pooja's going to take over with GPAI. And then after that as well, Pooja's going to give us some really juicy insights into the actionable steps that then we can take as AI practitioners to then slowly put compliance back in to structures and putting the responsible into responsible AI. So without further ado, let's move on. So AI legislation, right? We might be thinking, okay, we've come here for this webinar. Why should we even bother about learning about AI legislation in the first place, right? And really good question. You've come to the right place to hopefully find this answer. And I've broken it down into 3 levels. One is about the human level, right? We're the creators. So if I was to ask everyone to put their hands up if they wanted to cause harm or make people feel unsafe or to take away someone's fundamental rights. I think we'll hopefully see no one raising their hands to that, right? So the whole idea is about building the humanity back into this as well. On top of that human aspect, it's about the professional side as well, right? Where we're improving our code of practice. And more importantly, right, we're actually trying to use compliance as a language, a common language between technical teams and commercial teams to then be able to kind of create an ecosystem of collaboration and innovation. And then on top of that professional side, we're then talking about value creation of what you give to then the organization. So this is about building reputation and trust, but also more importantly, two things. One about providing clarity on the AI regulatory landscape, which as we've seen so far, it's been a little bit shaky, but slowly starting to get some clarity on all them throughout all the geographies. And also more importantly as well is about avoiding regulatory fines, right? Because then that money that is then paid towards regulatory fines has a greater chance of going into your pocket instead. So to kind of build more clarity behind that point of value creation, it's about two things. So one about the clarity of the regulatory landscape, and taken from a recent survey, we see that quite a few organizations are still grappling with even understanding their obligations, let alone implementing those obligations. So by being equipped with this knowledge, you're not only helping them with their technical requirements, but also on top of that, you're building in compliance with them as well from the ground up. And then secondly, again, with the fines, we can read the level of fines, right? These are massive. And obviously these, yes, depend on the severity of the case, but at the same time, these are really large amounts of money that shouldn't be wasted for the sake of building in compliance. So when we've kind of covered those levels, we also talk about why we need legislation from what's currently going on in the environment around us. So these are some examples kind of taken a few from the AI incidents database, a great database for those who want to kind of observe that a little bit in further detail. And those kind of taken from online sources. And basically it gives you, these sources give you at least like a subset of what's happening at the moment in terms of some AI related cases that can either affect transparency, privacy, or in this case, fraud as well. And then even beyond these kind of cases of what we see in the kind of Wild West AI environment, we also need to look at kind of what AI legislation is currently in place to then try and combat that. And so when we talk about one piece of legislation that tries to do that is maybe GDPR, right? And so GDPR talks about essentially a piece of legislation to protect our data privacy. So essentially how our personal records are collected and processed. And it also gives users the freedom to kind of rectify, delete records. And so, excuse me, when we look at a certain case here, take, for example, the OpenAI case of ChatGPT with the Italian Data Protection Authority, we're seeing that the AI system was actually shut down for a month, and for these following reasons, particularly about whether there's a consent mechanism in place and is there a process in place to allow users to delete or rectify their records. And so only after a month later, when OpenAI allegedly resolved some of those issues, that it came back onto the market, despite these concerns about hallucination, right? About kind of generating text that lacks any kind of factual standing. And so what we see here are kind of two fundamental questions, right? How practical is GDPR in the context of AI development? Because if you rectify records, then that means you're changing the training set. And so with that, you're changing potentially model behavior if you're deleting records in the same way as well. So it's talk about the practicality of that. And then secondly, about the enforceability of GDPR as well. And it seems like GDPR hasn't really got a lot to say in relation to AI regulation. So basically, we need to have AI legislation that kind of ensures legal certainty in AI and ensuring innovation that protects health, safety, and fundamental rights. So hopefully I've kind of convinced you of the fact from kind of some different perspectives. So now let's marry them up together and let's talk about something really important, right? The EU Act. So in this part, we're going to talk about the scope. We're going to talk about what topics we're going to cover, and even we're going to add a little interactive quiz for the risk classification part. So stay tuned, coming really shortly. So the first bit, the EU Act is the kind of first piece of horizontal legislation that talks about artificial intelligence, and it really focuses on health, safety, and fundamental rights. Here on the slide as well, kind of illuminated the definition of an AI system, and we've then translated that into kind of like a more nicer, prettier looking thing on the right-hand side to then just show you how an AI system is perceived within this piece of text. And what we're going to cover today is two key aspects. One about risk classification and those obligations attached to them. And then next, we're going to talk about GPAI, which kind of covers the generative AI perspective, which Pooja is going to cover. So firstly, in terms of the EU Act, we've got these different levels, right? We've got from unacceptable all the way down to minimal. And basically, as we go up this, we're increasing the risk to an individual's health, safety, and/or fundamental rights. And here we just included a kind of few examples. Obviously, it's not comprehensive just yet, but we're going to get more guidance from the AI Office, which is an organization that basically helps organizations to be compliant with the EU Act. So stay tuned for further guidance from them. And so basically, the question we might ask then as an organization is, okay, we have this risk hierarchy. How do we classify these risks for our systems? How do we allocate a risk score? So basically, at the moment, it's up to the organization to determine the risk level for that AI system. And basically, the overall kind of consensus is about working from the highest risk down and justifying as you go. And so we have a little kind of justification framework that might help to evaluate which risk level your AI system is appropriate for. And let's break this kind of justification process down. So we talk about the health, safety, fundamental rights in the same way as the EU Act does. But then we also talk about human versus AI control, which we'll talk about a little later. So the first section in this justification of how we kind of classify the risk level of an AI system is we look at health. So we answer questions like, will the AI system affect health outcomes for an individual or group of people? Or will the development of an AI system impact individuals or groups of people? So it's talking about health from an individual point of view, but also how it affects communities. And then next, when we talk about safety, we're talking more along the aspects of protecting someone's privacy, but also more importantly, in terms of model cybersecurity, which is actually a growing concern. And there's some great pieces of literature that give you a really good overview of essentially the different types of attacks a model can face, either during the training process or the inference stage. And then next, when we talk about fundamental rights, I've literally just taken a subset of fundamental rights from the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And so I've just taken a little subset that has somewhat of an interaction with AI systems that are currently on the market. So these are some things to maybe think about when we do the quiz. And then the final one, which I think is a really interesting one, is about human versus AI control, right? And it comes to that kind of fundamental ethical principle as defined by the high-level expert group that inspired this piece of legislation, which talks about human oversight and also within that a little bit accountability. And really it just asks these questions of who makes a decision and who executes the decision. So this diagram below helps to kind of show the flow of that decision-making process and how much influence that AI model does have on the overall final decision. So basically, in summary, this justification framework kind of comes down to this nice little kind of tabular format, right? Where we have health, safety, and fundamental rights. And it's really up to the organization to evaluate the risk level with respect to these different aspects. And then we have the final aspect of human versus AI control, where we talk about who or what is the decision maker and how much impact that AI system has on the decision maker. And so with that, we can use this as a way of creating somewhat of a consistent approach of how we classify a risk, an AI system with respect to the risk hierarchy in the EU AI Act. So with that in mind, we've actually got a little quiz prepared for you, and it's going to take form in a form of a poll. We've got 2 of them coming up, and we're going to give you some use cases. And basically, I just want you to have a guess using this framework, if you can, about which risk level these systems should be attributed to. Are we ready? So we have the first use case here. Can we get the first poll up, please, Maddie? So the first use case is then talking about an AI model to predict breast cancer likelihood from users' diet and genome. What do we think from here? Nice, we're getting some quick responses. Okay, wonderful. So we're starting to see some consensus, particularly along the high side at the moment. Some with limited, some with unacceptable. Nice, okay. What we've thought in ours, thank you so much for that poll, is then we thought that it's then attributed to the high risk. And the reason for it is then considering this justification framework, right? So in terms of the risk to health, that's quite high. Safety might be likely to cyber attacks potentially in a healthcare system. And then in terms of fundamental rights, maybe, but maybe not as significant. And then human versus AI control as well. But so I think overall, it's a relatively high risk system. Thank you so much for that one. Really good responses there. The next one is then talking about a healthcare chatbot to triage cases for emergency. Can we get this poll up, please, Maddie? Fabulous. What do you think about this one? Oh, okay. Very interesting. Nice. We're seeing some relatively uniform kind of distribution here happening. Nice. Okay, great. Yeah, good. All right. Okay, some people still chipping in, but I think we have a relatively kind of equal distribution here among unacceptable, high, and limited, which is very interesting. And I can see why some people have thought in some places. Really good. Give it a few more seconds. If you wanted to put in your opinion here. No, really good. Fab. Basically, we have then attributed this as a high-risk system. And yes, no, there's definitely some justification potentially for an unacceptable risk, but I think we need to think about the human versus AI control element. And yes, maybe that's something to consider, because then if the decisions are all made and executed by the AI system, maybe that is more towards unacceptable and that takes away human autonomy. The reason why we chose high is that although it's a chatbot, which we gave as an example with a kind of limited risk system, in this case, it has a healthcare application. So again, talk about the justification framework. We've got health, again, high risk, relatively high, safety, potentially, fundamental rights that could affect equal access to public services, for example. So that could also be quite significant. And then as we spoke about human versus AI control, but really, really good, really great to see so many responses from this. And I'm sure that will kind of light up the conversation in the chat as we speak, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of questions. So we're looking forward to answering those as we reach the end. But in the meantime, we've at least got somewhat of an understanding of the risk levels, and we've hopefully convinced you still that AI regulation is still really important for you guys. After that, we're now going to talk about risk obligations. So here in this part, I'm going to talk about the lower minimal obligations, as they're basically kind of clumped together. The text doesn't really explicitly talk about those things. It just really only talks about a kind of voluntary code of conduct to follow for non-high risk systems, aka no and minimal and limited systems. And so here it talks about kind of promoting AI literacy and also AI accessibility, right? So making sure that these AI systems are accessible to a wider audience. And then kind of more importantly, we talk about high risk systems. And in this case, we're talking about a conformity assessment, which then happens before the AI offering is on the market, but also human oversight as well. Very important, as we spoke about with the human versus AI control, as well as accuracy, robustness, and testing for cybersecurity as well, which Pooja will talk about in more detail. And again, Pooja will talk about this as well, about being registered in the central EU database. And so when we talk about conformity assessment, some people might ask, okay, what kind of scope, what kind of criteria are we looking towards? And obviously, one standard that has been kind of running around as being relatively close to being matched to the EU Act is the ISO 42001 standard. And so it's a really new standard, or relatively new, it's December 2023, but here it kind of focuses on an artificial intelligence management system. So it basically talks about how do you evaluate and treat AI-related risks, and how do you make sure that you have an AI policy that is in line with your organizational objectives, and then more importantly, with all of these processes in place, building trust in AI, which is something that is both close to my heart and Pooja's heart here. So basically, the 42001 helps to kind of combat how you evaluate risk, understand your risk landscape, and then adapt to then be prepared for the tomorrows. And I think with that, I'm passing over to Pooja to talk about GPAI. Over to you, Pooja.
Thank you, Alex. So till now, Alex has explained in detail about AI legislation and EU AI Act, and I'll start from general purpose AI. So if you are not aware about it, then according to EU AI Act, all the obligations and regulations on general purpose AI systems will be applicable since 1st August 2025, not even 1 year. So that is why it is very important to discuss about this topic. And we will start with general purpose AI systems. What is general purpose AI? So if you see the name general purpose, it means they are designed to perform a wide range of tasks. So they are very versatile in nature. They can also handle the growing amount of data set and also tasks. Plus, they are, for example, they are very flexible. For unseen tasks, we don't have to retrain them again and again, and they can be adaptable to unseen tasks as well. And example of two general purpose AI systems which we use on daily basis are first ChatGPT, which can summarize the text, which can translate the text, and even can do the image processing if you have used the DALL-E. Another very good example is Google BERT model, which is kind of a game changer in Google search engine, and it can handle billions of queries on daily basis. And if you want to see the practical use of it, if you type something in the Google and answer comes with a highlight, so that is the most relevant answer to your question. So you can see the BERT model there. Next. And so general purpose AI systems can be deeply embedded into various sectors, for example, finance, governance, and also healthcare sector. And with big capacity, big capability comes more responsibilities and bigger risks. And the risks related to general purpose AI systems are called systemic risk. Why systemic risk? Because they are broadly integrated, broadly deployed, and they have broader scope. So if there is some misinformation, misuse, or some error, they can create a widespread disruption. That is why they falls under this category. So what is widespread disruption? So for that, there are few criterias. For example, first, training computation. So if the training computation, the floating point operations per second are more than 10 raised to power 25, then they can fall under systemic risk category. And for example, other parameters you can see on the right side. One is a number of model parameters. So more number of parameters, more complexity, and more chances to have even risk. Then energy consumption during training, more energy consumption during training, more impact on infrastructure, for example, and on society. Bigger data set, bigger complexity, bigger risks, more chances to have systemic risk again. And one is model reach. So for example, if there are more than 10,000 business users or more than 1 million end users, then it is high likely that it can cause a widespread disruption. Next. So we talked about general purpose AI systems, then the risks associated to them. Now in this slide, we will see the responsibility of manufacturer and the European Commission for these systems. So if a manufacturer know that they are designing a GPAI system which has systemic risk, then they have to inform within 2 weeks to the European Commission about it. And they also have to provide all the evidences, supporting evidences for that classification and also for that device. And also European Commission has to publicly list this device on EU database, which about EU database, European Commission will issue some guidelines in the future. Please be updated with that. And for example, if a manufacturer fails to provide information about it to the European Commission or the risk classification of general purpose AI system, then European Commission can independently classify that system as systemic risk. And in the future, if manufacturer or companies have problem with that classification, further they can provide evidences and can also change the classification. So it's kind of flexible between European Commission and manufacturer. Next. So we talked about evidences that manufacturer has to provide many evidences to the European Commission. So what are the obligations for those evidences for the manufacturers or for providers? First, they have to provide a detailed technical documentation, which will contain information about model, data set, the sources of data set, verification, validation methods, risk analysis, risk mitigation strategies. So in summary, everything related to model and data set has to be there. Everything should be properly documented by answering what, why, and how. Second is they have to provide information and documentation to supply to downstream provider. This is very important because this contains the information about architecture, about limitation, about capabilities of general purpose AI system. And if a downstream provider want to integrate this GPAI system into their own system, then they will have all the information, they will be transparent. But of course, the manufacturers are can protect their intellectual property or copyrighted information from this part. Then third is copyright compliance. So in this case, if a manufacturer is using a copyrighted information or they have some copyright material, then they can create a policy to protect this material so that it's not in public, and to also encourage the competition between the manufacturers. Fourth is public summary. manufacturer has to provide a summary of the training data used for the system. It's for the transparency reason, so that consumers are aware that, okay, what kind of information has been used in the model. Then additionally, these are above, there were 4 important points, but if a manufacturer is creating a GPAI system, then they are advised to do adversarial testing, in that they can test the system in different environments against cybersecurity. So in summary, they have to test the robustness, transparency, and so that system is behaving the way it is designed for, and all the steps should be again documented properly. And if after the system is deployed, then if there are serious incidents from that system, then manufacturer has to document and report these incidents to the AI office, and also they have to provide the solution for those for the mitigation of those serious incidents. And if AI office is not very happy with the solutions, then they can go against the manufacturer decision as well. Plus, they have to provide an adequate level of cybersecurity protection for the system. Important point here to note that if a GPAI system or GPAI model is open source or closed, if it falls under systemic risk criteria, then manufacturer has to follow all the obligations above. But if a open source or free GPAI models doesn't fall under systemic risk category, then they have to follow copyrighted and public summary compliance. And if a GPAI model or system is used in high risk AI system, additionally, maybe it is integrated with the other system, then they both providers of GPAI systems must cooperate with the high risk AI system developers to ensure the compliance, that they both are at the same page. Next. So now we will talk about actionable steps. So till now we talked about GPAI, then systemic risk, obligations, and also the responsibility of manufacturer and European Commission. Now we will talk about compliance, and which comes under actionable step of the manufacturer. And what next, please? So what is compliance? So compliance means that AI system is safe and AI system is following all the rules and regulations. So it is kind of a way for the organization to ensure the end user, suppliers, and regulators that the AI system which manufacturer is creating is safe under law. They are following all the standards they mentioned, and they are also transparent. So that is why compliance is very, very important. And compliance can be 2 ways. There are 2 approaches for that. First is passive compliance. So in case of passive compliance, there is manufacturer doesn't have to seek third-party conformity assessment. So they can do the internal audits, and they can monitor the system internally. They can check if system is following all the rules or it's under all the obligations. They can also follow standards, which Alex also mentioned before, ISO 42000K regarding AI system management, and also other standards. If they want to check the system, they can monitor risk internally, mitigate risk, and also check additional parameters like robustness, transparency. And Alex mentioned, or he focused a lot on health, safety, and fundamental rights. So here manufacturer can also check if they are also aligned. Then second is active compliance. So in case of active compliance, manufacturer can seek independent expert for this, and it can be 2 cases. First, if they are seeking voluntarily to increase the trust for the regulators and users and suppliers, and they can show the certificate that our system is following all the rules and regulations, and they are more trustworthy and more recognized. Second is in the case for example, high risk AI systems. So sometimes for some systems, it is mandatory to seek third-party conformity assessment, and they have to go for it, and they can apply for external certification in those cases. Next. So we talked about compliance now, but okay, compliance checking all the rules are set, or system is following all the rules, obligations, standards. But other than that, what can be done to protect health, safety, and fundamental rights? So in that case, AI professionals play a very crucial role, and they are responsible for project planning, development, and deployment. And in all three cases, they can check if system is compliant, and they can also see lots of things which we will discuss now. And I'll start with project planning first. So project planning means, okay, we want to make a system. So first we have to do the market research about it. So also requirements analysis, what can be the risks associated with that system, how it can impact the society, what can be the compliance regulations, which standards to follow for that system, and also what according to market research, which methods to be implemented. For example, it's highly advised to adopt best practices in coding based on research, and this all has to be properly documented. Also here they can make the policies for copyrighted materials which we used, which I talked about before, and all these informations should be properly documented before we start with the AI development part. And next. So in case of AI development, we have all the policies and all the overview of the system. Here we create the system, we create the model, then we train the model based on data set, and data set sources have to be mentioned, how data set has been filtered, who is creating those data set, what are the qualification of the people who are working on that has to be there. Then also focuses on model performance optimization. So model has to be trained, and various parameters, metrics like epochs or other learning rate has to be optimized here, and it has to be set on the best performance of the model. Plus the focus should be on fairness, transparency, robustness, explainability for transparency reasons. And to track all this information, model has to be run, and there should be proper logging that, okay, we have tested the system for a very long time, and here is the information about the behavior of the system, so it should be properly logged. Plus there should be information about risk management and mitigation strategies, what has to be implemented, what has been implemented, and you also have to implement during it, and every detail, what you are using, what technology you are using, which model you are using, how you are doing verification and validation for that system, and also which environment you are using. So every little detail has to be documented. I know we have now very less time, for example 1 year, but after 1 year you have to meet all these requirements, so it's better that start now. And post deployment now, next please. So system is deployed now. Post deployment, so what can be the requirements after deployment? First is instruction for use. So in that case, this is again for transparency reason, also while protecting the intellectual property or copyrighted information. But the user should know that what is the capability and limitation of the system, or they can integrate this system into their device, or what is intended purpose of the device, what is the architecture, input output, so everything should be listed there. Second is post market surveillance strategy. So system is in the market, but you know the AI behavior, it can change in the real environment, so you have to continuously monitor the system performance, and there should be a proper human oversight for that as well. And if system is behaving in uncertain way or predicted way, then you have to implement the mitigation strategies for that. Then continuous learning. In case of continuous learning and improvement, you have to again do manufacturer has to be updated themselves with the latest trend of research, and they can implement here the new strategies or new models or new research. So that model is updated up to date to the research level, and if they have to go through compliance again and again, then manufacturer has to implement those as well after update. Next. So now I have explained about GPAI system, systemic risk classification or criteria for that into GPAI system, then responsibility of manufacturer, and also obligations for manufacturer, how to make the technical documentation as well, and actionable step. We also check the compliance. So this is kind of summary for the whole session. And as we are reaching now to end of this session, so if you want resources, because I checked in chat that many people want resources from us, so you can check our new white paper. Here is the link and QR scan as well. Here you can find the EU AI Act summarization and how to implement that as well. Again, resources ISO 42000K. I think me and Alex both mentioned it before. And if you want to see this webinar, please check it. It's related to AI system management, and it's also list all the information from top to bottom approaches, from planning, deployment, and post deployment. So everything is there. So please feel free to check it out as well. Yeah. Thank you.
Amazing, amazing, so good, so good. Thank you both so much. My brain is full, but before I get into that, I'd love to see some people in the chat saying thank you. Give us a little emoji. Let us know you enjoyed it, and we'll get to some questions now. Amazing. In terms of the chat, it was very nice at the start. Actually, we were seeing people have joined from all over the place. So we've got people in Canada, we've got people in New York, we have people in Belfast. I'm hoping there's a few people in the UK. The UK people have been a little bit quiet, so come on, say hello, don't be shy, and I'll give you a little shout out. What I might do, Alex, is get you to stop sharing your screen.
Absolutely.
That'll make us a little bit larger for the people at home, and we'll go from there. As mentioned, we will run through the Q&A. So if you do have questions, please do put them into the Q&A, and we'll do our best to get through them. I've definitely got a lot myself as well, actually. So we'll go with that. But before I do, Olivia, hello from Manchester. Get in there. Thank you very much, Olivia. It's nice to know we've got some UK representation. Malai's on there. Great presentation. Thanks for sharing. Salma, thanks a lot. Hello from London. Great presentation. Alex and Pooja, well done. So they're coming through. Keep them coming, though. Keep them coming. It's nice to know that people have enjoyed it at home. I'm going to perhaps kick things off, actually. There's 2 or 3 questions in the Q&A. Keep them coming, but I'll maybe kick things off just by saying, obviously, you've talked a lot about the EU AI Act. As mentioned, we have people joining us from all over, Canada, America. If you're not based in the EU, does the EU AI Act still apply? Is that a really silly question? What does it look like if you're not based in the EU?
Do you mean to take over this, Pooja?
Yeah, I can take over it. Thank you.
Yeah, if you want to answer it, please do.
Okay. So if you are a provider and you are located in the third country, but you want to put your system into EU market, and if you are creating a system, you are also again located in the third country, but your output of AI system is used in EU, then all the rules related to EU AI Act will be applicable. So in the end, if EU is using your system somehow, directly put or indirectly, the output of AI system is used, then all the rules will be applicable.
Wow, we have some work ahead of us. The data community has some work ahead of us, and I'm very grateful that BSI are flagging all of this sort of stuff and making these resources available. I guess that comes on to my next framework. There's a lot to be done. There appears to be many different frameworks, some really practical examples there about best practices and all that type of stuff, which was very valuable. But equally, sometimes I have a simple brain, and it's a bit like, where do you start? Are there any tips for the people out there watching along at home? What would you recommend? Where would you start with all of this stuff? And yeah, I'll maybe come to you, Alex, but again, feel free, jump in, both of you.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can break the steps down that Pooja's done into a nice short-term, medium, long-term type view. In terms of the short-term aspects, I think the easy one, but the very, very boring one I know, is about documentation, right? So it's making sure that you have, for example, data cards that actually understand what data you have in, how is it distributed, does it include private information, does it include protected characteristics? Also things like model cards as well. So things like that detail model architecture, that detail how long it's been trained for, the estimated amount of training computation as well. That was also something that Pooja mentioned in her GPAI section as well. So those sorts of things, although they're mind-numbingly boring, those are the things that can be easily done from a short-term perspective to slowly build that consideration of how we kind of move more into the compliance with the EU AI Act. I don't know if you want to complement anything with that, Pooja.
No, I think well explained.
Mm.
So
Oh,
I think we have even time for 1 year. So when you start, for example, voluntarily, then with experience, you can add more in technical documentation as well. And for example, I'm working on lots of technical reviews right now. And in those, the manufacturer doesn't know how to write about the AI systems, how to provide the detail. So we also guide them how to provide information, how to align or how to comply that system with. And for example, we also provide training to the people who wants to know about it, how to comply with all the obligations, but not to the client who is involved with us for the technical documentation assessment, of course.
Awesome. There are a couple of questions appearing in the chat. If I could ask, if you have the questions, please do put them in the Q&A. I'm very thorough. I like to keep the chat for emojis and location information only. Basically, no, if you could put it in the Q&A, it just makes life a little bit easier for us. And the other thing that I will call out is in the Q&A, you can upvote questions as well. So even if you haven't got your own question, you can upvote other people. So that'd be really, really helpful. I'll jump straight into the questions after this. But one other question I had from my side, actually, and then we'll fire through the chat, is within an organization, who should own AI regulation? What are you seeing with your clients? Because quite often, as practitioners, as data scientists, data engineers, data people, you're doing the research, you're building the models, you're excited by all that type of stuff. Should it be on the practitioners, or should there be another person allocated this responsibility in an organization? What do you see, and what would you recommend?
Yeah, no, I'll take over this one. I think the very simple answer is everyone. In terms of responsible AI itself, which the legal part sits in, I break it down into like a structure. So you have the legal section, which covers the EU AI Act. There's the ethical part, which talks about how do we interact with end users and stakeholders. And then the other pillar talks about then the technical aspects. So these are the technical teams then. And then on top of that is then the standards, the roof of that structure, which then shows the kind of consideration and the implementation of those different columns. So basically, that whole responsible AI framework, that structure within an organization, allows for collaboration on all of the different sides of the business, from legal and compliance and leadership within the legal pillar, end users from the ethical pillar. We have the technical teams then from the technical pillar, and then standards would then be governments and regulatory bodies and all those sorts of people. So basically, your question of who should be involved in that conversation, it's basically everyone within that conversation. It's up to the organization about what process do you have in place to make sure that all of those columns and all that structure is then interacting outwards to then collect feedback and then improve that product.
I was on mute. I was a bit too slow there. Amazing. Thank you very much. I promised to get into the question and the Q&A, and I'm definitely coming there. Everyone at home, don't shoot me. But that leads into one more question from me. I'm absolutely getting in at this point. But in terms of small versus large organizations, what does this look like? Are there different levels of regulations for these people? If you're a 2-person startup, is it the same for you? How should you approach it as a 2-person startup as opposed to a massive enterprise company where you can bring together all these pillars and big teams and stuff like that? What does it look small versus large organizations?
I can take it.
Please,
It's
Pooja.
okay. So, of course, there are differences between both, and small companies and startups and also medium-sized companies are getting so many advantage under EU AI Act, and they can also provide simplified technical documentation. So please don't ask now what is simplified technical documentation, because they have to provide, EU Commission has to provide a template about it, that how much simplified version they can provide for third-party assessment. Again, they can provide simplified version of QMS, quality management system. They will also get money-wise like discount for the third-party conformity. And also, if they want to test their system in real environment or on the sandboxes, they want to use sandbox, then they have also priority for that. So there are different rules for bigger organization and small size organizations, because EU Act wants that all can follow this act, and they are more flexible to enter into it. So they don't want to impose all the regulations the same way for the both.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Pooja. Right, I'm into the questions. I've got my screen. You can read along, actually, Alex and Pooja, just as I'm going through them. I've got the questions ordered by most upvotes, if you could do the same. Question at the top from Rosemary, most popular. Well done, Rosemary. Rosemary, you've been very good in the chat as well. Really appreciate that. So Rosemary's question is, how do you document transparency and fairness requirements when providers like OpenAI don't disclose it? Can you speak to that, please?
Yeah, no, really good. Why don't I answer a bit of this, and then Pooja, please.
Of course.
Add some stuff to this.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of documenting transparency and fairness, right? When we talk about transparency, we talk about how does the model convert the input into output. And so when we talk about documenting transparency, it's maybe talking about the processes in place that you have to then facilitate transparency. So for example, there's a few methods that we can use to incorporate transparency into our models in the field of explainable AI. Very rudimentary, but still useful. So these are things like line, which then talks about a decision boundary at a point. Then you can define where that decision boundary is when a model output is made. And then also Shapley values. So basically they give you a little idea of how each feature has contributed and summed up to then the output decision, essentially. So these are kind of the methodologies that we can use to kind of like document for transparency. And then for fairness requirements, it's really talking about how do we make sure that we have equitable outcomes, right? And there's different ways of defining equitable outcomes, and Pooja will definitely refer you to a few standards that talk about this. So things like demographic parity, or even just looking at a confusion matrix as well, will be able to help. So again, it's setting out what you think is fairness, because what we will understand is that it might be deemed fairness with one metric and then won't be in another. And then that refers to the kind of Simpsons paradox, right? Where it might be deemed fair in one place and not in another. So you have to be very crystal clear about what definition you're using and why is that being used? What's the motivation behind that? Pooja, please.
Yeah, I think you have explained everything, but I can summarize both points. So fairness means it's under fundamental rights. So all the people are treated equally. And we have to make ensure that the system is not biased for some regional people. For example, some people migrate from one place to another place. So it should be equal for everyone, even for different sex, even for different religion, even for like male, female, or something. It should be equalized between the people. It should not be biased towards one group of the people. So that is the fairness. And transparency means that manufacturer is providing the information to the to the consumer, that okay, they are using AI system and the output is generated also by AI system, not by a human. So that is also a transparency clause. And transparency also comes under that you are providing a detailed description of the data set you are using. So it's not like you can hide something. So you have to be transparent about the data set, because it's related to, again, fundamental right. It can be biased towards some group of the people. So that is why transparency clause is very, very important here, because maybe manufacturer wants to hide some data set and in the future it can impact the fundamental right. So these are kind of interrelated.
Amazing, amazing. Thank you both very much. Next question at the top there from Eleanor. The EU AI Act is very recent, and to my understanding, participating countries are required to come up with the local regulations to ensure companies are compliant. Which department in the UK is responsible for this? So first of all, is that how it works? And if it is, could you tell us a bit more about the UK specifically?
Yeah, I'll take over this one, Pooja, and please add some. Yeah, so then in terms of let's have a look, the department in the UK, I think that's a relatively simple one. And obviously, as we've seen a change of government, we've seen now that AI regulation is going to be commonplace. And I think the department for that will be the Department of Science and Innovation, I believe, that will have those conversations, and obviously will then feed through in the regular lawmaking process. In terms of then the local requirements, is that then within the EU, or is that then for specific countries? It would be worth to clarify that question if we can, Elena.
Amazing. Thank you very much. I'm going to keep going rapid style, actually, Pooja. So I'll come to you for the next question, if that's okay, and we'll maybe bounce back and forward. The next question that's highest on the list is from Krupa. They're talking about the future, which I love to hear. You know, people are building careers. There's some moving sands at the moment. So I think people are keen to know what the future looks like. So the question there is, what new skills might data professionals need to acquire to navigate through AI regulation? So are these regulations, do you think, changing the skill set required? And if so, you know, what does that look like? What would be good to future proof your career?
So according to me, because I'm also working as AI technical specialist, first be updated with the technology, because I think AI is changing every month. Something new is coming. So please follow good websites, good research paper, and be updated with the technology. And if we talk about EU AI Act regulations and how they have to comply with it, then I think it's start step by step again, which Alex also mentioned. So try to document everything what you are doing, try to test the system. So EU AI Act is not to control the technology, first of all, it is to make the technology secure. So they are also providing user a kind of security, transparency, and health and safety. So all these parameters are very, very focused in EU AI Act. So that is why this is the focus of EU AI Act, not to control the technology. Of course, you can innovate with it. Of course, try to implement new things. But important is test, verify, validate the system, mitigate the risks which are coming, secure the system with proper cyber security measures, and also like be updated with all the research which is coming related to these technologies, and document everything. What
Amazing.
Alex, if you want to add something, then
yeah, no, just super quick to add. Pooja's definitely running, keeping up to date with the latest research. I think at the same time, it's then thinking about all these different AI ethics principles of privacy, transparency, fairness, human oversight, etc. And it's going a step further than what you're currently doing right now, which is just the implementation part. So the next part is then thinking about, how do we incorporate transparency? Let's explore these different explainable AI techniques. What about privacy? There's things like private stochastic gradient descent, right? Which is also a really interesting paper on that, the use of synthetic data. So there's techniques that you can already use to putting these ethical principles in place. It just requires a little bit of knowledge building on how to implement on those different areas. Hope that helps.
It definitely does, man. It definitely does. And you two are in sync. Like there was no signal in there, but Pooja knew that you had a little snippet to add in, which I've got a lot of time for. I like this. Using the force. I'm a little conscious of time. We do try to keep these slots to 1 hour. So I'm going to take one more question, and then we can pull together any extra questions, maybe even look to put them in a blog post or something like that. So we'll take one more question and then we'll draw things to a close from there. I'm actually going to jump just down to Olivia. We've had a couple of other questions from Rosemary before. So I'll jump to you, Olivia, in Manchester. Olivia's question is, I have a quick question. In terms of ISO 42001, I understand why developers of AI should adhere to these standards. However, would this also be relevant to operators of AI or clients or people in receipt of the models? So this might be obvious, but want to check. So where does this all sit? Is it the developers building the models? If you're using models, have you got an element of responsibility? Could you just speak to that question there from Olivia, please?
Yeah, I'll take this one. So in terms of ISO 42001, what it really covers is about the use, deployment, and development of these technologies. So it's not only about the people who just then use that technology on a day-to-day basis using ChatGPT to write some documents within an organization, but it's also on top of people who are then developing these technologies. So in terms of who should kind of be involved with that standard, who kind of should look at this standard, is actually quite a plethora of different stakeholders, from yourselves, the developers, all the way through to the business leaders. And again, it's more importantly creating, as I said before, that conversation around compliance. And I know compliance can sound very boring and very dry, but what really this should be about is creating a dialogue, more importantly, between what's at the moment two separate silos of technical and commercial teams. And so being part of that process, you're actually democratizing change from the ground up rather than from the bottom down, well, along with the bottom down as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Anything to add on that one for yourself, Pooja, as Alex ticked it off for you? Pooja, are you happy with Alex's answer there? If you weren't, I think you'd have told us. I think the Jedi Force would have let us know, to be honest. But were you happy with everything there, or anything to add for Olivia?
No, I think he has explained in.
He's a good guy, isn't he?
Yes.
We're in safe hands. We're in safe hands. I think actually, Alex, you're actually joining us at Oktoberfest, I believe, aren't you, as well? In real life. Oh, mate.
Yes,
even
really
better.
excited.
We love a bit of in real life.
Yeah.
Amazing. As mentioned, I feel like we could probably spend another hour going through this, actually. And in terms of compliance, I actually find it fascinating. If I'm honest, I didn't think I would, and I've learned so much over the last 18 months from BSI, and the fact you guys make this so real, that this is coming next year, and we're working in an industry where everything we're building is going to have an impact on society.
Yes.
This stuff is needed. Let's get in there, let's have these conversations and make it happen. And you've delivered it in such an interesting and engaging way that I think actually it sparked a lot of thought for everybody. So thank you both very much from that perspective. I will also say thank you for the preparatory work in doing this. I do say it every time, but as you mentioned, Pooja, at the start there, you've spent some time today preparing the session, making sure you're ready. So it's not just the hour that you've given up here. You've obviously given up a lot of time getting ready for it as well. And the thank yous have been coming through, so it's been very well received. So I will draw things to a close, but just before I do, how did you find that, Pooja? Did you enjoy your webinar with the Data Science Festival? Were you happy with everything?
Yeah, of course, definitely. And I like the audience also, because I think Alex will agree with me on that more question people ask, I think better is the session. So
Yeah.
they were very engaged in chat, and they were asking so many questions. It doesn't matter how is the question, but they were very engaged. They wanted to know more, and I think that is a
Amazing.
success for our webinar.
It's music to my ears, actually. We're so proud of the Data Science Festival community, and they're amazing, whether it's online or whether it's in person. They're always in there having a good chat with us, which is cool. And yourself, Alex, how did you find it?
Yeah, no, it was absolutely wonderful and really great to have so many people to join along in this really important conversation now. And from what we're seeing with this latest AI phase of we're now transitioning from this Wild West AI to a more human-centric AI. And I think that's so important nowadays, and it's so encouraging to see so many people involved in this conversation now. And I'm really looking forward to meeting you in person to just talk about this in more detail and how it can be incorporated in the organizations that you work in.
Amazing, amazing. Well, thank you both. Thank you to BSI as a partner, invaluable to the community. We couldn't run the community without companies like BSI getting involved. And thank you all for joining us wherever you are in the world, be it Manchester or Canada. We're happy to have you with us. So yeah, thank you all very much. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.